I've always been one for road trips. There's something about the open highway, the quiet hum of the car engine, and the promise of an adventure that draws me in. I've driven cross-country 3 times now, seen more of the US than most people do in their whole lives. But after what happened last year, I'm not sure I'll ever take another road trip again. It started as a pretty typical journey. I'd planned to drive from my hometown in Ohio all the way to the Pacific coast, somewhere near Big Sur. I wanted to experience the California cliffs and hear the waves crashing against the rocks, maybe even camp along the way. I packed up my little SUV with all the essentials: snacks, camping gear, a first aid kit, a few bottles of water, and some extra gas, just in case I found myself in the middle of nowhere. I'd plotted out my route carefully, avoiding major cities because I hate the traffic. I was aiming for the scenic routes, the long stretches of deserted highways through mountains and forests. There's a sense of freedom out there, far away from civilization. The first day was uneventful. I drove through Indiana, passed through a few small towns, and by the time night fell, I found a decent rest stop where I could stretch out in the back of my SUV and get some sleep. The stars were bright that night, and the air was crisp. I remember thinking how perfect the start to my journey had been. The next day, I crossed into Missouri and decided to detour off the interstate onto one of those scenic highways I love so much. I can't remember exactly which road it was, just that it was a long, winding stretch of asphalt cutting through dense forests and rolling hills. There wasn't much traffic, just the occasional car or pickup truck speeding by. I remember feeling completely alone, and I liked it. I'd been driving for a few hours when I noticed the gas gauge was getting low. I hadn't seen a gas station in a while, and I started to get a little nervous. As if on cue, I saw a sign for a small town, about 10 miles ahead, promising fuel and food. Relieved, I slowed down a bit and kept my eyes peeled for the turnoff. When I got to the town, though, something felt off. It wasn't anything I could pinpoint right away, just a gut feeling that gnawed at me as I passed the welcome sign. The streets were empty, no cars, no people. The buildings looked old, like they hadn't been updated in decades. The gas station was an ancient-looking thing with a single pump, and the convenience store next to it had peeling paint and broken windows. I needed gas, though, so I pulled in and parked beside the pump. When I got out, I noticed the air smelled wrong. It was thick, damp, like something was rotting nearby. I chalked it up to the abandoned state of the town and walked up to the store, hoping to pay for the gas. The door was unlocked, but the store was dark inside. I stepped in cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Anybody here?" My voice echoed back at me, and there was no answer. I could see shelves lined with dusty cans of food, old newspapers scattered across the floor, and a faint buzzing sound coming from the back of the store. Flies, maybe? I felt a chill creep up my spine. The whole place felt wrong. It wasn't just abandoned. It was like it had been forgotten, like time had stopped here and left everything to rot. I turned to leave, but just as I reached for the door, I heard it. The sound of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. My heart jumped into my throat as I spun around, but there was no one there. Just rows of empty shelves, the dim light filtering in through the dirty windows. I didn't wait to investigate. I bolted out of the store, got back into my car, and sped off down the road without bothering to fuel up. My gas gauge was dangerously low, but at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from that place. The road out of town twisted and turned through the trees, and I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. But the only thing behind me was the setting sun, casting long, eerie shadows across the road. After what felt like hours, I finally found another town, much bigger than the last. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station, practically shaking as I filled up the tank. Inside, the store clerk gave me a weird look when I asked about the last town, the one with the creepy abandoned gas station. "Never heard of it," he said with a shrug. "Maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere?" That didn't make sense. I'd followed my GPS perfectly. I tried to brush it off, convinced that I must have misread a sign or taken a turn too early. But deep down, I knew something was off. Still, I had a long drive ahead of me, and I couldn't let a weird experience in a ghost town derail my entire trip. The next couple of days passed without incident. I drove through Kansas and into Colorado, stopping at a few campgrounds along the way. The nights were peaceful, the stars shining overhead as I drifted off to sleep in the back of my SUV. For a while, I almost forgot about that creepy little town. But then, I crossed into Utah. It was late afternoon when I noticed something strange. I was driving through a particularly desolate stretch of highway, with nothing but red rocks and desert for miles in every direction. The road was empty, no other cars in sight. I hadn't seen a gas station or a rest stop for hours, but that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was the fact that I'd seen the same sign 3 times now. A rusted, faded sign with a single word on it: "Welcome." The first time, I thought it was odd, but I didn't think too much of it. The second time, I got a little uneasy. But the third time, that's when I knew something was very wrong. I slowed down, glancing at my GPS. It showed that I was still on the right road, but when I looked closer, I realized the distance to my next destination hadn't changed in over an hour. It was like I wasn't moving at all. Panic started to rise in my chest. I pulled over to the side of the road and tried to get my bearings. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. For a few minutes, I just sat there, trying to calm myself down. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just tired from all the driving, and I'd somehow missed a turn without realizing it. I decided to keep going, figuring I'd find a gas station or a rest stop eventually. But as the sun set and the sky turned dark, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. The road stretched on, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was going in circles, trapped in some kind of loop. And then I saw it. The town from before. It was the same one. The creepy little town with the broken down gas station and the empty streets. My heart pounded in my chest as I passed the welcome sign, the same sign I'd driven by days ago in Missouri, the same peeling paint, the same abandoned store. I knew it wasn't possible. I'd driven hundreds of miles since then. I was in a completely different state. But there it was, as clear as day. I didn't stop this time. I didn't even slow down. I floored the gas pedal, speeding through the town as fast as I could. But the further I drove, the more I realized something horrifying. I couldn't get out. No matter which direction I turned, no matter how far I drove, I always ended up back in the same place. The same town, the same gas station, the same damn welcome sign. I don't know how long I spent trapped there, driving in endless circles through the night. Hours, maybe. Days. Time didn't seem to work right there. It was like the world had twisted around me, trapping me in some kind of nightmarish limbo. Eventually, my gas ran out. I was stranded on the outskirts of the town, the engine sputtering to a stop as I coasted to a halt. My phone was still useless, and the silence was suffocating. No wind, no birds, nothing. Just the creaking of my car cooling in the desert heat. I sat there for a long time, staring at the horizon, hoping for some kind of explanation. But none came. The sun had long since set, and the darkness around me felt alive, somehow, like it was watching, waiting. And then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. A sense of relief washed over me as I thought, for a brief moment, that someone had finally found me. I watched as the vehicle approached slowly, its lights cutting through the thick darkness. But something wasn't right. The closer the vehicle got, the more I realized that it was the same truck I'd seen earlier, back in the town. The same battered old pickup with a cracked windshield and a busted headlight. My stomach twisted in fear. The truck pulled up beside my car, and I could see the silhouette of the driver, a dark figure in the driver's seat. They didn't move. They just sat there, staring straight ahead, their hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I couldn't see their face, just the outline of their head, motionless. I don't know how long we sat there like that, side by side on the deserted highway. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. Finally, the truck's engine roared to life again, and it drove off into the night, leaving me alone once more. But I wasn't relieved. If anything, I felt even more terrified, knowing that whatever that was, it was still out there, watching me. I spent the next day trying to figure out a way to escape. I walked back into the town, hoping to find something, anything, that would help me. But the place was just as empty as before. I walked through the streets, peered into the abandoned buildings, but found nothing. No people, no animals, no sign of life at all. I tried to start my car again, but it was dead, completely out of gas, and there was no way I could push it all the way back to civilization. I was trapped. As the days went by, I started to lose track of time. I couldn't remember how long I'd been there, driving in circles, trying to escape. I tried different roads, different paths, but they all led back to the same place. And every night, the truck would return, its headlights appearing in the distance, getting closer and closer until it was right beside me again. And every night, the driver would just sit there, staring at me through the windshield, never moving, never speaking. On the fifth night, I broke. I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of my car and ran, sprinting down the road, away from the town, away from the truck. My feet pounded the pavement as I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't care where I was going. I just wanted to get away. But no matter how far I ran, I always ended up back where I started. I finally collapsed on the side of the road, my chest heaving, my body shaking with exhaustion. The truck was gone, and the night was eerily silent once more. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring up at the stars, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. I don't know how long I stayed there, lying in the middle of the road, but eventually, the world around me began to blur. My vision darkened, and I felt myself slipping away into unconsciousness. The last thing I remember is the sound of an engine in the distance, growing louder and louder, until everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. My car had been found abandoned on the side of the highway, and a passing driver had called for help. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. It's been a year since then, and I still can't explain what happened. I've tried looking up that town, tried finding any record of it, but there's nothing. It's like it never existed. Maybe it didn't. All I know is that I'll never take another road trip again. Because out there, on the long, empty highways, there are places that don't belong in this world. Places that you can get lost in. and never find your way out. It was the summer of 2015, and I found myself at a crossroads, figuratively and literally. After months of relentless work at my design firm in Seattle, I needed an escape. The open road called to me, and I decided to embark on a solo road trip to the Pacific Coast Highway. My plan was simple: drive down from Washington to California, taking my time and enjoying the sights along the way. The first leg of my journey was smooth. I left early in the morning, the sun rising to cast a golden hue over the landscape. I had a playlist full of my favorite tunes, snacks packed, and a sense of adventure filling my spirit. As I drove down Highway 101, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. The lush greenery of the Pacific Northwest rolled past my window, and I couldn't help but smile. By the time I reached the outskirts of Portland, I decided to make my first stop. I pulled into a quaint diner, its neon sign flickering in the late afternoon sun. The moment I stepped inside, I was enveloped in the aroma of coffee and grilled sandwiches. I ordered a cup of joe and a slice of pie, chatting briefly with the friendly waitress about the best routes along the coast. After a quick bite, I hopped back in my car, feeling rejuvenated. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in hues of orange and purple. I continued south, enjoying the fading light and the scenery shifting from dense forests to coastal views. As night fell, the atmosphere changed. I was now driving through stretches of highway surrounded by thick trees, the moonlight barely penetrating the canopy above. The radio played softly, but I found myself turning it down as I began to feel the weight of the night settle in. Somewhere between Coos Bay and Crescent City, I noticed a flicker of lights off to my left. It caught my attention, but there was nothing on the map indicating any towns or establishments. Curious, I slowed down to take a closer look. There was an old, rundown motel that appeared to be abandoned, its neon sign buzzing faintly. The urge to investigate gnawed at me, but I also felt an unsettling twinge of fear. Despite my reservations, I pulled into the parking lot. The building loomed before me, a relic of better days. I stepped out of the car and approached the entrance, peering through the dusty windows. The lobby was dark, but I could make out old furniture covered in sheets. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. A sense of foreboding washed over me, but my curiosity pushed me to push the door open. The creaking hinges echoed in the silence. I stepped inside, the smell of mildew hitting me like a wall. My heart raced as I walked further in, flashlight in hand. I scanned the area, noticing faded photographs on the walls, remnants of a once thriving business. It felt like I had stepped into a time capsule, the air thick with an unsettling energy. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a faint rustling coming from the back of the motel. It sent chills down my spine, but I couldn't turn back now. I followed the sound, creeping through the dimly lit corridor. The floorboards creaked under my weight, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As I neared the source of the noise, I stopped dead in my tracks. A door at the end of the hall was ajar, and the light flickered inside. Heart pounding, I pushed the door open just a crack. What I saw made my stomach drop. Inside the room, there were old furniture pieces scattered around, but that wasn't what caught my eye. A figure was hunched over, scribbling furiously in a notebook. It was a man, his hair unkempt, clothes dirty, and a wild look in his eyes. I felt an overwhelming urge to turn and run, but I was frozen in place. "Who are you?" he suddenly called out, his voice raspy and filled with suspicion. "What do you want?" My voice caught in my throat. I'm just passing through," I stammered, stepping back. I didn't mean to intrude. He stood up abruptly, the notebook slipping from his grasp and falling to the floor. It hit the ground with a thud, and I caught a glimpse of the pages. It was filled with frantic writing, doodles, and what appeared to be names crossed out. The man's expression shifted from suspicion to something more intense, almost manic. "You shouldn't be here," he yelled, his eyes wide with panic. "This place is cursed. They'll come for you." My instincts kicked in, and I turned to leave, but before I could make it out of the room, he lunged for me. "You can't leave. You have to help me." I barely dodged his grasp, adrenaline fueling my escape as I sprinted down the hall and out of the motel. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut and locking it. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the parking lot, desperate to put distance between me and the motel. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him chasing after me. But the motel stood silent and still, swallowed by the dark. My heart raced, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in the pit of my stomach. I needed to calm down, so I pulled over at a rest area about 20 miles down the road. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the panic. I was safe, I told myself. Just a freak encounter with a troubled man. But the unsettling feeling wouldn't fade. After a few minutes, I decided to stretch my legs. As I stepped out of the car, I heard something. A soft whisper carried on the wind. My heart sank. I looked around, trying to find the source, but I was utterly alone. I forced myself to ignore it, convincing myself it was just the wind rustling the trees. Back on the road, I tried to refocus on the journey ahead. I turned up the music, trying to drown out my thoughts, but I couldn't shake the eerie feeling from the motel. I resolved to keep driving until I reached the next town. Just as I settled back into my rhythm, my headlights illuminated a figure on the side of the road. It was a woman, standing alone in the darkness, her clothes tattered and dirty. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to keep driving, but my sense of empathy won out. I pulled over. "Are you okay?" I asked, rolling down the window. She stepped closer, her face illuminated in the glow of my headlights. Her eyes were hollow, almost lifeless. "Please, I need help," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm lost. I don't know where I am." My heart sank. "Where are you trying to go?" "Anywhere but here," she whispered, her gaze shifting nervously to the trees behind her. "They're coming." Before I could respond, I heard the faint sound of laughter, a chilling, echoing laugh that seemed to come from the woods. My pulse quickened, and I glanced around nervously. "You should get in," I urged, terrified of the laughter growing louder. She hesitated, but finally opened the door and climbed in. I locked the doors and started driving again, my stomach churning. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to break the tension. "Lisa," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, Lisa, where were you headed?" "I don't know," she said, staring blankly out the window. "I just need to get away." The laughter returned, louder this time, and I felt my heart race. It echoed through the trees as if something was lurking just beyond the road. I tried to focus on the highway, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Did you come from that motel?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her eyes widened, and she turned to look at me. "You saw it too?" "What do you mean?" "The cursed place," she said, her voice trembling. "They say it's haunted. People go missing there." I swallowed hard. "I met a man there. He seemed disturbed." A shiver ran down her spine. "He's one of them. You shouldn't have gone there. They don't let anyone leave." A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I pressed down on the accelerator, trying to put as much distance between us and the motel as I could. Just then, my headlights caught a glimpse of movement on the side of the road. I jerked the wheel, narrowly avoiding a figure that stumbled into my path. "What was that?" I yelled, panic rising. "It's them!" Lisa screamed, her voice laced with terror. "They're coming for us!" My heart raced as I glanced in the rearview mirror. Shadows moved in the darkness, figures darting in and out of sight. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, the engine roaring as I tried to escape. The laughter echoed around us, growing louder and more frenzied. The trees seemed to close in around us, creating a tunnel of darkness. I could barely see the road ahead, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Keep driving," Lisa shouted, her voice a desperate plea. Just then, the car jolted violently, and I felt a sharp pain as the steering wheel slipped from my grip. I tried to regain control, but it was as if something had latched onto the vehicle, pulling us back toward the motel. I fought with all my might to keep the car steady, but the laughter enveloped us, drowning out all rational thought. The trees closed in, and I could barely see the road as it twisted and turned. "Hold on," I yelled, gripping the wheel with both hands. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure emerge from the woods, running alongside us. It was the man from the motel, his face twisted in rage. "You can't escape," he screamed, reaching out as if to pull us back. I screamed as I hit the gas even harder, the car surging forward. The headlights illuminated more figures emerging from the shadows, all moving toward us, their laughter mingling with screams of anger. "Faster! Faster!" Lisa cried, her panic infectious. I pressed the pedal down until the engine roared in protest, but we were still surrounded. I could hear their footsteps pounding against the pavement, echoing like a heartbeat. The shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and I felt my sanity fraying. Just when I thought I could no longer take it, the road opened up ahead, a stretch of darkness that seemed to lead into safety. I steered toward it, praying for escape. The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence as I shot through the clearing. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. "Did we make it?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "I think so," I breathed, glancing around. The woods were behind us now, and the darkness of the night felt oddly comforting. But my relief was overshadowed by an unsettling feeling that we weren't out of danger yet. We drove in silence for a while, the tension hanging thick in the air. The adrenaline began to fade, and exhaustion set in. "I need to stop," I finally said, my voice shaking. Lisa nodded, her eyes distant. "Find a place, anywhere but here." After a few more miles, I spotted a small gas station, lit by a flickering neon sign. I pulled in, feeling a mix of dread and hope. Once inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting an artificial glow over everything. The cashier, an older man with a weathered face, looked up from behind the counter. He raised an eyebrow as I stepped up, clearly noticing my disheveled appearance. "Everything all right, young man?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Do you know about the motel down the road?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His expression darkened. "You went there?" I nodded, the weight of the encounter crashing down on me. "We need to get away from here. Best advice I can give you is to get out of this town and never look back," he said, his voice low. "That place isn't what it seems. People have disappeared there, and they don't come back." Lisa shivered beside me, and I felt my heart race at his words. "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperate for answers. "The stories go way back," he continued, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to appear. "They say a darkness lurks there, feeding off the lost souls who wander in. Once you enter, it's hard to leave. I exchanged a worried glance with Lisa. The memories of the man, the shadows, and the laughter came rushing back, and I felt a cold sweat on my brow. "Can we just fill up the tank and go?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The cashier nodded, turning to the gas pumps outside. "Fill up and get out of here fast. The night has a way of trapping those who linger." As I filled the tank, I could feel Lisa's eyes darting around, scanning the shadows. "Do you think they'll come for us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't want to think about it. "Just stay close to me," I said, trying to soothe her nerves. Once the tank was full, we hurried back inside. "Thanks for the gas," I said to the cashier. "We're leaving now." "Good luck," he replied, his eyes heavy with concern. "Stay safe." With that, I jumped into the car, my heart racing as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I sped out of the parking lot, the glow of the gas station fading behind us. We drove for miles, the silence between us, thick with fear. The trees blurred past, and I kept my eyes on the road, determined to escape whatever dark force had been pursuing us. But the road felt different now, as if it had twisted into a maze. Shadows danced along the edges, and I felt a weight pressing down on my chest. "Do you think we lost them?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," I replied, glancing at her. "But I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there." Just then, my headlights illuminated something on the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes as a figure stumbled into our path. It was a girl, no older than 16, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Please help me," she cried, collapsing against the car. "They're coming for me." My heart raced as I looked at Lisa, who was frozen in fear. "Should we let her in?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before I could answer, the laughter echoed through the trees again, louder than before, sending chills down my spine. I couldn't risk it. "I'm sorry, but we can't help you," I shouted, my voice filled with urgency. But the girl's desperate eyes pierced through me, and I felt a tug at my heart. "Please, you don't understand," she pleaded, her hands pressed against the window. The shadows began to move, creeping closer to us as the laughter grew louder. I had to make a decision. I pressed the locks on the doors, knowing it was the only way to keep us safe. "Drive, just drive," Lisa screamed as the figures emerged from the darkness, their laughter echoing all around us. I slammed on the gas, my heart pounding, as I accelerated past the girl, the sound of her cries fading behind us. The laughter surged, a cacophony of madness filling the air as the shadows closed in. I couldn't look back. I had to keep driving. The road ahead twisted and turned, and I felt as if I was in a nightmare from which I could not wake. I pushed the accelerator down even harder, desperate to escape the darkness. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the car, and I swerved, nearly losing control. "What was that?" Lisa cried, panic rising. I glanced at the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. The girl we had left behind was now in the back seat, her expression twisted into a horrifying grin. "You can't escape," she said, her voice echoing with malice. I slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a halt. Lisa screamed as the girl lunged for her, but I grabbed her arm just in time. "Get out," I shouted, throwing open the door. We bolted from the car, hearts racing as we fled into the woods. The laughter chased us, ringing in our ears as we stumbled through the darkness. Branches snagged at our clothes, and the underbrush scratched at our skin. "Where do we go?" Lisa cried, fear evident in her voice. "Just keep running," I urged, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The shadows felt alive, shifting and swirling around us, as if they were trying to pull us back into their grasp. We ran until our lungs burned, crashing through the underbrush. I didn't know where we were going, but I could feel the darkness closing in. We couldn't stop. We had to keep moving. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled into a clearing. The moonlight illuminated a small cabin, dilapidated and forgotten. "In there," I shouted, and we dashed toward it, throwing ourselves inside. I slammed the door shut behind us and bolted it, panting heavily. The cabin was filled with dust and the smell of decay. It was empty, except for a few pieces of furniture and an old fireplace. We sank to the floor, our hearts racing, desperate to catch our breath. "What just happened?" Lisa gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I replied, shaking, "but we have to find a way out of here." Just then, we heard it. The laughter echoing through the trees. It was close, too close. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "We need to leave now," I said, scrambling to my feet. As we searched for another way out, I noticed a window at the back of the cabin. "Over here," I called, and we rushed toward it. But just as we reached the window, the door swung open. The girl stood there, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You can't escape," she repeated, her voice sending chills down my spine. I felt paralyzed with fear, but I couldn't let her get to us. "Run," I shouted to Lisa, pushing her toward the window. "I'll hold her off." "Don't," Lisa cried, but I was already moving, grabbing a broken chair leg from the floor. The girl lunged for me, but I swung the makeshift weapon, catching her off guard. She stumbled back, and I seized the moment to shove Lisa through the window. "Go, I'll catch up." Lisa hesitated for a second, but I pushed her. "Just go, I'll find you." As soon as she was out, I turned to face the girl, who was regaining her composure. I backed away, my heart racing. "Stay back," I yelled, brandishing the chair leg. But she only laughed, a sound that echoed in the cabin. "You think you can fight me?" she taunted, her form shifting in the dim light. I took a deep breath and charged at her, swinging the leg. She dodged easily, her laughter ringing in my ears as she moved like a shadow. I swung again, but she vanished, reappearing behind me. "You're too late," she whispered, her breath cold against my ear. "You belong to us now." In that moment, I felt a sense of despair wash over me. The shadows seemed to reach for me, pulling me into their grasp. I fought with everything I had, swinging wildly, but I felt myself slipping. Just as I thought all hope was lost, I heard a loud crash from outside. Lisa was back, wielding a flashlight. She burst through the door, blinding the girl momentarily. "Get away from him!" she screamed. I took the opportunity to rush past her, grabbing Lisa's arm as we bolted out the door together. The laughter followed us, growing more frantic, but we didn't look back. We ran through the woods, the trees blurring past as we fled. The darkness seemed alive, trying to trap us in its clutches, but we kept pushing forward, fueled by sheer determination. Finally, we broke free from the trees and stumbled onto a deserted road. I could see the faint glow of lights in the distance. "There," I pointed, and we ran toward the lights with everything we had left. As we neared the road, a truck pulled up, its headlights illuminating our path. The driver, an older man with a concerned look, jumped out. "What happened?" he asked, seeing the fear in our eyes. "We need to get out of here," I gasped, pulling Lisa close. The man nodded, his expression grave. "Get in. I know this place. You're not safe here." We scrambled into the back of the truck, and he peeled out onto the road. As we drove away, I looked back at the trees, half expecting to see the girl or the shadows pursuing us. But nothing followed. The laughter faded into the distance, and a sense of relief washed over me. We were finally free. As we drove, I turned to Lisa, still shaken but safe. "What the hell just happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I don't know, but we survived." The driver glanced back at us, his expression serious. "You'll want to forget this place," he said, his voice low. "The darkness doesn't let go easily. If you linger, it'll come back for you." I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. I didn't know what we had encountered that night, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never return to that cursed road, and I would never let the darkness claim me. As the truck drove us toward safety, I felt the weight of my experience settle on my shoulders. I had escaped, but the memories of that night would haunt me forever. No one should have to experience the horrors that lay hidden along the roads we travel, and I couldn't shake the feeling that darkness lurked just beyond the edges of our reality, waiting for its next victim. The journey may have ended, but the shadows would always remain. Road trips are supposed to be fun, right? A sense of freedom, wind in your hair, adventure over the horizon. But what happens when the road stretches too long? When you find yourself in a place that doesn't seem to belong to the real world anymore? I used to love driving across the country, seeing the small towns and the wide open spaces. That was before my trip out west last summer. Now, I don't think I'll ever set foot behind the wheel again. It started as just another long drive. I had to move from Columbus, Ohio, to San Diego for a new job opportunity. Rather than deal with the hassle of planes, baggage, and car shipping, I thought I'd drive it myself. It'd be an experience. Me and the open road, a week of pure solitude and the changing landscapes of America. I mapped out my route, which included some off-the-beaten-path highways, because I preferred the slower, quieter roads. It's where you see the real America, right? The first few days were uneventful. I left Ohio, cruised through Indiana and Missouri, and even made a stop at Kansas City for some famous BBQ. By the third day, I was well into Kansas, ready to pass into Colorado. That's when things started to go wrong. I was heading west, trying to make it through this part of the country in a hurry. Kansas, no offense to anyone, is mostly flat farmland and endless sky. It's beautiful in its way, but after hours of driving through fields that stretched forever, I was desperate for a change of scenery. The interstate was monotonous, so when I saw a sign for a state highway that promised a scenic route, I took it. That decision would change everything. I remember the sign vividly. Highway 89, scenic route through Devil's Divide. I'd never heard of Devil's Divide, but it sounded rugged and interesting. My GPS didn't know the road, but I figured it was one of those less traveled highways that just didn't make it onto the main system. I wasn't in a hurry. I had time for a detour. As I turned onto Highway 89, the landscape started to change. The flat farmland gave way to rolling hills and thick patches of trees, which was a relief after hours of staring at open fields. The road was winding, narrow, and completely empty. I hadn't passed another car in miles. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, and the warm light bathed everything in golden hues. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. About an hour into the drive, the road took a sharp bend, and I noticed something odd. There were no signs of life. No farmhouses, no other vehicles, not even animals. Just road and trees. The radio had long since lost its signal, and my phone had no service. I wasn't concerned at first. After all, rural areas often had dead zones. But as I kept driving, the uneasy feeling in my stomach started to grow. I passed what looked like an old wooden sign, weathered and unreadable. It creaked in the wind, which had picked up noticeably. The sun was setting faster than I'd anticipated, and the sky had started to turn a deep, bloody red. It was beautiful in a way, but unsettling too. I hadn't seen a car or house in hours, and I began to wonder if I'd made a mistake taking this route. The deeper I drove into Devil's Divide, the more isolated I felt. The trees grew denser, casting long shadows across the road. It felt like I was driving through a tunnel made of branches and leaves, and the light seemed to dim even faster. Soon, I had to turn on my headlights. I told myself to stop worrying. It was just a road, a scenic route, maybe a little more rural than I expected, but still just a road. There had to be a town, or at least a gas station up ahead. I'd grab a snack, fuel up, and keep going. I had plenty of time. But time started to play tricks on me. It felt like I'd been driving for hours, yet my GPS still showed no sign of progress. It was stuck. No service, no maps, just a frozen screen, showing me as a tiny blue dot in the middle of nowhere. And still, there were no signs of civilization. That's when the first sign of something truly wrong appeared. I saw a car parked on the side of the road, an old, rusty pickup truck with a shattered windshield. It looked abandoned, sitting at a strange angle as if it had been hastily pulled over. I slowed down, thinking someone might be in need of help. But as I passed the truck, I realized there was no one inside. The driver's side door was wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze, but there were no people, no signs of anyone having been there in a long time. Chilled, I drove on, telling myself it was nothing. Just an old truck left behind by someone who'd broken down and decided to walk for help. But the feeling of being watched crept in. I couldn't shake the sense that something was out there, hiding in the trees, watching me. I kept driving. It was dark now, and the road seemed to get narrower, more winding. The trees pressed in on both sides, so close that my headlights barely pierced the gloom. My eyes played tricks on me, and I thought I saw shapes darting between the trees, but every time I looked directly, there was nothing, just shadows. Then I came across another car, a sedan this time. Like the truck, it was abandoned, sitting by the side of the road with its door hanging open. I didn't slow down this time. Something felt wrong, very wrong. Why would there be two abandoned cars on this empty stretch of road? Where were the people? I pushed down on the gas pedal, heart racing. I just wanted to find a town, a gas station, any sign of life. But the further I went, the more I realized that the road wasn't leading anywhere. My fuel gauge was dropping fast, and I hadn't seen any road signs or markers for miles. That's when I saw the figure. It was just up ahead, standing in the middle of the road. A person. They were far enough away that I couldn't make out any details, but there was no mistaking the silhouette of a tall, slender figure standing perfectly still in the center of the highway. My first instinct was to stop, but something in my gut told me not to. My mind raced. Why would someone be standing in the middle of the road at night, miles from any town or home? I slowed the car, my hands gripping the wheel tightly, but I didn't stop. As I approached, I realized that the figure wasn't moving, just standing there, waiting. When I got close enough to see their face, I wished I hadn't. The figure wasn't a person, at least not anymore. Its skin was gray and stretched tightly over its skull, eyes sunken and empty. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, and its clothes were tattered and filthy. It looked like it had been standing there for a very long time. I swerved around it, my heart pounding in my chest. I barely missed hitting it as I sped past, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see if it was following me. The road twisted and turned, and I realized with growing horror that I was back where I started. The same stretch of road, the same twisted trees, the same abandoned truck. I must have driven in a circle, but how? There were no turnoffs, no other roads to take. It was impossible. But there it was, the old rusty truck, exactly where I'd seen it earlier. Only this time, there was someone standing next to it. It was the same figure from before. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped past it, heart racing. But no matter how far I drove, I couldn't escape. I kept seeing the same things over and over. Abandoned cars, twisted trees, and that awful figure standing in the middle of the road. At some point, my gas light came on. I knew I couldn't keep going much longer. The fuel gauge was nearly empty, and I hadn't seen a single gas station or sign of life. My phone was dead. I was completely alone. Or at least, I thought I was alone. The first time I saw the lights, I thought I was imagining things. A pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, far off in the distance. Relief washed over me. Someone else was out here. I wasn't alone. Maybe they could help me, show me the way to the nearest town, or give me some gas. I slowed down, waiting for the car to catch up. But as the lights drew closer, something felt off. The car wasn't approaching at a normal speed. It was moving impossibly fast, closing the distance between us in seconds. I glanced in the mirror again, and my blood ran cold. The headlights weren't attached to any car. They were just floating there, two orbs of bright light speeding toward me. I pressed down on the gas, but my car sputtered and groaned as it struggled to go faster. The lights gained on me, getting closer and closer until they were right behind me, blindingly bright. I couldn't outrun them. The lights passed through my car, filling the interior with a blinding white glow before disappearing into the night ahead. For a moment, I was completely disoriented, my vision blurred by the intense light. When I could see again, I was back at the truck, and this time, the figure was gone. I don't know how long I drove, but eventually my car ran out of gas. It sputtered and died on the side of the road, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. The road was silent, the trees pressing in on me from all sides. I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The night stretched on, and the silence was deafening. Finally, I got out of the car. There was no point in staying inside. I started walking down the road, hoping to find help, but after hours of walking, I realized I was back where I'd started. The same truck, the same stretch of road. I'm still here, walking, trying to find a way out, but I don't think there is one. It's been days, weeks, maybe months. Time doesn't seem to work right here. I keep seeing the same things over and over. The same truck, the same figure, the same blinding lights. I'm stuck in some kind of loop, and I can't escape. I don't know if anyone will ever find this. I'm leaving this note in the hopes that someone will. If you're reading this, stay away from Highway 89. Don't make the same mistake I did, because once you enter Devil's Divide, you don't come out. I've always loved the open road. Something about the freedom of endless highway and the changing scenery always felt like an escape, a break from the world. That was until my last road trip, a trip that turned a simple drive into the worst nightmare of my life. It was late October, and I was headed from my small town in northern Pennsylvania down to my sister's place in North Carolina. The drive was going to be long, but I didn't mind. I had a few podcasts lined up, snacks in the passenger seat, and a tank full of gas. I left around noon, hoping to reach her place by midnight at the latest. That was my first mistake. I decided to take the less popular route to avoid the traffic around Washington, D.C. The back roads had always been a personal favorite of mine. Quiet, scenic, and often a little faster if you knew the shortcuts. I'd done this drive a few times before, so when my GPS lost service after I veered onto a particularly secluded highway, I wasn't worried. The road signs were still there, and I knew the general direction. All I had to do was follow the highway until I hit a familiar town. It was a little before sunset when I spotted a sign for a town called Wicklow Ridge. The name didn't sound familiar, but it was only 50 miles out, so I decided to make a quick pit stop. That decision still haunts me. As I turned onto the road leading to Wicklow Ridge, the air around me seemed to change. The once clear sky began to darken quickly, with thick clouds rolling in faster than seemed natural. The road narrowed, lined with trees so tall and close that they formed a canopy overhead. Within minutes, I felt like I was driving through a tunnel. It wasn't long before the last bit of daylight disappeared completely, leaving me in near total darkness. There were no streetlights, no signs of any houses or buildings, just this narrow, winding road that seemed to lead deeper into the woods. My headlights were the only thing keeping the night at bay, but even they didn't feel strong enough. The trees were so dense that they swallowed up any light I cast, creating a thick wall of black on either side of me. I should have turned around then, but there was nowhere to turn around. The road was too narrow, and there were no side streets or pull-offs. I kept driving, hoping the town would appear around the next bend. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes, I finally saw a sign. "Welcome to Wicklow Ridge." Except the sign looked old, not just weathered from the elements. Ancient, covered in a layer of grime and moss that suggested it hadn't been touched in decades. As I passed the sign, a chill crept down my spine. My instincts were screaming at me that something wasn't right, but I pressed on, trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid. The first building I saw was a gas station, or rather, what used to be a gas station. It was boarded up, the windows shattered, and the pumps rusted and overgrown with weeds. There were no lights, no people, just an eerie, suffocating silence. I pulled over, my car idling in front of the decaying structure. I debated whether I should turn around or keep going, but I didn't even know if I could find my way back to the main road. My phone still had no service, and there was no one to ask for directions. Against my better judgment, I decided to continue into the town. As I drove further into Wicklow Ridge, I realized it wasn't just the gas station that had been abandoned. The entire town was empty. The streets were lined with houses, many of them Victorian in style, but every single one was dark, with shattered windows and doors that hung crookedly on their hinges. The place looked like it had been deserted for years, maybe even decades. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of ghost town, a place people had left in a hurry. Maybe I'd missed a road sign warning me of its abandonment. But deep down, I knew there was something more to it, something far more sinister. I was about to turn around when I noticed movement up ahead. At the far end of the street, I saw a light, just a flicker, but enough to catch my attention. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe someone was still here, someone who could help me, tell me how to get back to the highway. I drove toward the light, and as I got closer, I saw it was coming from a large building that looked like an old town hall or courthouse. The windows were mostly intact, and a single light flickered from one of the upper floors. I parked my car outside and sat for a moment, staring at the building. I should have left then. I should have trusted the voice in my head telling me to drive away. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The air was cold, colder than it should have been for late October. The wind had picked up, rustling through the trees and carrying with it the faintest sound of voices. I stopped, holding my breath. Yes, there it was again. A soft, distant whisper, almost like someone was calling my name. I shone my flashlight around, but saw nothing. The door to the building creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was musty and thick with the smell of rot and mildew. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I made my way toward the staircase, the light from my flashlight dancing across faded wallpaper and broken furniture. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers had grown louder now, but they still sounded distant, like they were coming from the walls themselves. I reached the second floor, where the flickering light was coming from, and saw a door slightly ajar. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. The room was empty, save for a single chair in the center, facing the window where the light had been coming from. But there was no lamp, no candle, just that one chair, sitting in the middle of the room, as if waiting for someone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the chair, but suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was no one there. My heart was racing now, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I rushed toward the door, yanking on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was stuck. No, it was locked. From the outside. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but all I heard in response were the whispers. They were louder now, echoing through the room, swirling around me. I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around the room for any other way out. That's when I noticed the chair had moved. It was subtle, just a few inches, but it was unmistakable. The chair had been facing the window, but now it was turned slightly toward me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They weren't distant anymore. They were right behind me. I turned slowly, my flashlight flickering, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing in the corner of the room, cloaked in shadows. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark shape, taller than any person I'd ever seen, its presence suffocating the air around me. The whispers were coming from it. Dozens, maybe hundreds of voices all speaking at once, too quiet to understand, but loud enough to send a chill down my spine. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight as the figure began to move toward me. The chair scraped against the floor, moving on its own now, inching closer and closer. I fumbled for the door again, my fingers trembling as I tried to force it open. The figure was almost on me, the whispers deafening now, wrapping around me like a cold, invisible hand. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The whispers vanished, the room was silent, and the door swung open behind me. I didn't think, I just ran. I bolted down the stairs, through the decaying hallway, and out into the cold night air. My car was still there, and I wasted no time jumping in and slamming the door shut. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, but finally, the engine roared to life. I didn't look back as I sped out of Wicklow Ridge, the town disappearing into the rearview mirror like a bad dream. The road was still narrow, still lined with towering trees, but I didn't care. I just drove, as fast as I could, until I saw the familiar lights of the highway, up ahead. I never found Wicklow Ridge on any map. I've tried searching for it, looking through old records and ghost town databases, but there's nothing. No mention of it anywhere. It's like the place never existed, but I know what I saw. I know what happened. And every now and then, when I'm driving late at night, I hear those whispers again, faint and distant, calling me back to that forgotten stretch of road. I'll never go back, but I fear, deep down, that one day it might find me again. There's something comforting about road trips. The hum of tires against asphalt, the wide open sky stretching out endlessly above you, and the reassuring familiarity of pit stops. But that was before I stumbled across that gas station, the one I'll never forget. It was supposed to be a quick cross-country drive from Denver to San Francisco, a solo trip before starting my new job. I'd done long-distance drives before, but this one felt different. I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Still, I chalked it up to nerves about the move. The first couple of days went smoothly. The Rockies were beautiful, the highways clear, and I made decent time. I planned to push through Nevada in one day, heading along a stretch of highway that cut through the high desert. The area was desolate, miles of nothing but scrub brush, sand, and the occasional crumbling building. I had the gas gauge firmly in mind. I knew better than to let it drop too low on these remote highways. But after 5 hours of driving, and with no gas stations in sight, I started to get anxious. My fuel light blinked on just as the sun was setting, turning the horizon a deep orange. There was no turning back now, only forward, into the empty desert. Then, just as my anxiety peaked, I saw a faded, old-fashioned gas station sign flicker in the distance. Last stop gas, 15 miles ahead. Relief washed over me. 15 miles? I could make that. The road to the station was narrow, cracked, and littered with weeds. The sign was barely visible in the twilight, its neon letters barely clinging to life. Last stop gas blinked faintly, as if it hadn't been properly lit in years. The gas station itself was old, rusted pumps, peeling paint on the building, and a cracked window. There was a single dim light over the entrance. I pulled up to one of the pumps, my headlights cutting through the thickening dusk. The whole place had an eerie vibe, but I brushed it off. Desperation had a way of dulling your instincts. I stepped out of the car, the desert air biting at my skin, unusually cold for this time of year. There were no other cars around, just me, my tired sedan, and this decaying gas station. The silence was thick, almost oppressive. I walked to the pump, relieved to see it still had a nozzle attached. But as I reached for it, I noticed something odd. The pump handle was old, really old. It looked more like something from the 1950s than a modern gas pump. There were no digital screens, no card reader, just a dusty mechanical dial that spun like the kind you'd see in black and white movies. I tried to convince myself it was just a quirky old gas station. I pulled out my wallet and walked inside to pay, hoping to find a clerk. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, and a tiny bell above it jingled in the empty air. The interior was just as worn down as the outside, dusty shelves lined with canned goods that looked ancient, their labels faded and unreadable. An old vending machine sat in the corner, its glass cracked, but there was no sign of anyone behind the counter. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice seemed to get swallowed up in the emptiness. There was a register on the counter, and next to it, an old-fashioned bell, the kind you'd see in old hotels. I tapped it. The metallic ring echoed throughout the store. A moment passed, then two. Nothing. I was about to head back to my car when I heard footsteps from the back room. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone dragging their feet. The door behind the counter creaked open, and a man emerged. He was tall, gaunt, with deep-set eyes that made him look far older than he probably was. His skin was pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. "Help you?" he rasped, his voice rough like sandpaper. "Just need to fill up," I replied, forcing a smile. The man stared at me for a moment, eyes scanning me like he was sizing me up. His gaze made my skin crawl, but I shrugged it off. He nodded slowly and gestured to the pump outside. "Cash only," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I handed him a 20 and quickly turned to leave, eager to get out of there. Something about that man unnerved me, like he was holding back a dark secret just behind those hollow eyes. I walked back to the pump, feeling his gaze follow me from the window as I filled up my car. The gas trickled out slower than any pump I'd ever used, the numbers on the dial barely creeping forward. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure that the man was still watching me, though I couldn't see him anymore. Finally, the tank was full. I hung up the nozzle and hopped back into my car, ready to leave that creepy station behind me. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of the man in my rearview mirror. He was standing in the doorway, staring after me, his silhouette a dark shape against the fading light. I shook it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, it was just a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere. Creepy, sure, but nothing to worry about. The road ahead was long and straight, cutting through the desert like a scar. I cranked up the radio to drown out my thoughts, but all I got was static. That's when I noticed something strange. The highway I'd been driving on seemed different. The road was narrower, more cracked than I remembered. The sky, which had been a rich purple just a few minutes ago, had turned an inky black, like it had swallowed the stars whole. There were no streetlights, no mile markers, nothing but darkness pressing in from all sides. My headlights barely pierced the gloom, illuminating only a few feet in front of me. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. It read 9:13 p.m. That didn't seem right. I'd left the gas station just after sunset, around 6:30 or so. I should have seen other cars by now, or at least some sign of civilization. But there was nothing. Just the road, stretching endlessly into the void. I started to feel like I was driving in circles, even though I hadn't taken any turns. My stomach tightened with unease. I checked my phone for a signal. Nothing. No service. I glanced down at the fuel gauge. It was already dipping below 3/4. I had just filled up. How was that possible? The longer I drove, the more disoriented I became. The road seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. Landmarks I'd passed earlier seemed to reappear. An old rusted sign here, a crooked tree there, as if the landscape itself was repeating. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around. But where would I go? Back to that gas station? Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something darting across the road just beyond the reach of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. The car screeched to a halt, and I sat there, breathing heavily, scanning the darkness. There was nothing, just the quiet hum of the engine and the oppressive silence of the desert. I pressed the gas and continued driving, but my nerves were shot. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the periphery of my vision made me jump. I felt like I wasn't alone. Something was out there, watching me from the blackness. I sped up, desperate to escape, but no matter how fast I drove, the road just stretched on and on. Then, without warning, my headlights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. My heart leapt into my throat. I slammed on the brakes again, the car skidding to a stop. I flicked the headlights off and on, but they wouldn't come back. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by an ocean of black. My only company was the deafening silence and the faint thrum of my car's engine. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I thought about calling for help, but my phone was still dead. No signal in sight. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized just how isolated I was. That's when I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road, just ahead of my car. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the dark. But when I opened my eyes again, it was still there. A tall, dark silhouette, motionless, watching. My heart pounded in my chest, my breaths coming shallow and fast. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stared at the figure, frozen in place. And then, slowly, it began to move toward me. I slammed the car into reverse, flooring the gas pedal. The tires screeched as I sped backward, the figure still advancing, its shape barely visible in the dim moonlight. My car jolted and rattled as I swerved back onto the main road, desperate to escape whatever that thing was. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw it again. The same gas station, the same faded sign, the same pale man standing in the doorway, staring right at me. I don't know how I made it out of there. Somehow, I found my way back to the main highway, and by the time I reached civilization, it was almost morning. I've never taken that route again. I've never even told anyone about what happened. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving and the road is empty, I think about that gas station. I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to pull in. And I wonder if they'll ever find their way back out. There's a certain kind of thrill in driving alone at night. The open road, the hum of the engine, and the empty miles stretched out in front of you can make the world seem simple, until something happens to shatter that illusion. This is a story I've never told anyone, because I still can't explain what happened. And frankly, I'm not sure anyone would believe me. But I can't shake it from my mind. It haunts me, especially every time I hit the road. This all started a few years back, on a road trip from Los Angeles to a small town in New Mexico. I'm a photographer, and I was chasing this once-in-a-lifetime shot of an abandoned mining town deep in the desert. The catch was that the best time to shoot was at dawn, when the light was perfect, so I decided to drive through the night to get there. I packed my gear, gassed up the car, and hit the highway just after sunset, planning to arrive before the first light hit the desert sands. The first few hours were uneventful. I blasted some music, drank too much coffee, and settled into the drive. The desert is eerie at night, sure, but I've always enjoyed it. The vast openness, the silence. It's like you're the only person left in the world. The traffic had thinned out quickly after I passed the last major town, and soon it was just me and the road. At some point, probably around 1 a.m., I noticed something strange. Up ahead, in the distance, I could see the silhouette of a figure standing by the side of the road. I didn't think much of it at first. You see some weird things when you're driving out in the desert. People broken down, hitchhikers, or sometimes just locals wandering. But as I got closer, something about the figure unsettled me. It was a man, at least I think it was. He was standing completely still, facing the road with his arm outstretched, thumb up in the universal gesture for hitchhiking. His clothes were dark, almost blending into the night, but it was his posture that was off. He was too still, not moving at all. Normally, hitchhikers shift, shuffle, look around. This guy just stood there, like he was frozen. I couldn't make out his face in the darkness, but the way he stood sent a chill down my spine. Now, I'm not someone who picks up hitchhikers, especially not in the middle of nowhere at 1 a.m. It's just not smart. So, I kept driving, letting my headlights wash over him as I passed. That's when things started to get strange. As I drove by, I glanced in my rearview mirror, expecting to see the man's figure fade into the distance. But instead, the mirror showed something else. The man was still standing in the exact same spot, like I hadn't passed him at all. It was as if I hadn't moved, or he hadn't. My stomach tightened, and I felt this strange sense of disorientation. I knew I'd passed him. There was no way I hadn't. But he was still there in my rearview mirror, perfectly still, watching my car disappear into the night. I shook it off as a trick of the dark, convincing myself that my eyes had played a trick on me. Maybe the long hours of driving were getting to me. So, I kept driving. The road was straight and flat, the kind that lets you zone out if you're not careful. But after about 10 minutes, I saw something up ahead again. Another figure on the side of the road. My heart skipped a beat. It was the same man. I was sure of it. The same outline, the same posture, thumb still up, face still turned toward the road. Only this time, he was standing much closer to the road, almost as if he had moved just a little bit closer than before. I felt a knot tighten in my gut. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. The road had been completely empty. There were no other cars, no side roads, and he hadn't been in sight when I looked back before. But there he was, unmistakably the same hitchhiker. I gripped the wheel tighter, determined not to stop. As I passed him again, I stole another glance in the rearview mirror. And again, he didn't fade into the distance. He was still there, still watching, still waiting. The same unchanging figure. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. My mind raced with explanations, but none of them made sense. Was it a trick of the light? Was I losing my grip on reality? Maybe the desert was playing games with my eyes. Either way, I wasn't about to slow down. For the next 20 minutes, I forced myself to focus on the road ahead, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to check the rearview mirror again. But then, I saw him for the third time. This time, he was in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my car screeching to a halt just a few feet away from him. He didn't flinch, didn't move an inch. He just stood there, facing me, his face obscured by shadow. My headlights cast an eerie glow around him, but no matter how hard I tried to focus, I couldn't make out his features. It was like his face was wrong somehow, blurred, like something was deliberately hiding it from view. I was paralyzed with fear, my mind racing between fight and flight. I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to see what this was up close. But I couldn't stay there either, not with him just standing there, blocking my way. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at him. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Time felt strange, like it wasn't moving right. But then, slowly, the man lowered his arm. His thumb, which had been pointed up for a ride, dropped to his side. And then he turned and began to walk. No, not walk. Drift off the road, disappearing into the darkness without a sound. The moment he vanished from my sight, I hit the gas, my tires kicking up dirt as I sped away. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest, but I kept going, driving faster and faster, desperate to put as much distance between me and that man as possible. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The rest of the drive was a blur. I eventually made it to the mining town, shot my photos, and tried to push the experience out of my mind. I even convinced myself it had been a hallucination, brought on by exhaustion and too much caffeine. But a few weeks later, something happened that made me question everything. I was back in Los Angeles, going through my photos from the trip, editing shots late into the night. I had almost forgotten about the man on the road. Almost. Until I saw something in one of the pictures. It was a shot of the mining town at sunrise. The empty streets, the decaying buildings, and the beautiful stark landscape stretching out behind them. But in the background, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was a figure. Dark, indistinct, standing on the edge of the frame, watching. The same figure, the same posture. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my blood running cold. It couldn't be him. It didn't make sense. But there he was, standing just out of reach, just far enough away to make me question whether I was seeing things. I deleted the photo. I tried to move on. But even now, whenever I drive at night, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting, watching. And one day, I fear I'll see him again. That was my last solo road trip at night. I can't explain what happened, and I don't expect anyone to believe me. But take my advice. If you're ever driving through the desert late at night, and you see someone by the side of the road, don't stop. Don't look. Just keep driving. Because once you see him, he'll never stop following you. I've always considered myself a bit of a night owl. Long road trips in the dead of night were never a problem for me. There's a kind of peacefulness in the empty stretches of highway, the isolation of driving alone beneath the stars. I thought I had seen it all during my late-night drives, until that one trip changed everything. It was supposed to be a simple drive from Flagstaff, Arizona, back to my home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I had been visiting some old college friends for the weekend, and the drive, about 6 hours or so, was one I'd made more times than I could count. I had decided to leave around midnight to avoid traffic, thinking I'd be home by dawn. I packed my bags, filled the gas tank, and hit the road. The first 2 hours were uneventful. I played some music, snacked on gas station junk food, and enjoyed the stillness of the desert as the road unspooled before me. The sky was pitch black, with no moon that night, just an endless canopy of stars. There was something soothing about the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thumping of tires on the asphalt. But as I neared the border between Arizona and New Mexico, something began to feel off. The first hint of it was subtle, an odd pressure, like the air around me was getting thicker. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the fatigue kicking in. I wasn't far from a rest stop, and I figured I'd pull over for a break soon. Then, I noticed the car. At first, I thought it was a reflection, or a shadow, in my rearview mirror. It was just a glimmer of light, like a car far behind me, but it seemed to hover, never getting closer or farther away. I glanced again, but the light was gone. Maybe it had turned off the highway, I thought. A few minutes passed, and I forgot about it. The road was long and lonely, but I was making good time. Then, just as I was beginning to relax, the light returned, brighter this time, closer. It was definitely a car now, following me from a distance, though I hadn't seen it approach. It hadn't been there moments ago, and now, suddenly, it was. The car didn't have its headlights on, which immediately struck me as odd. I tapped my brakes lightly to let them know I'd noticed, hoping they'd get the message and turn their lights on. Nothing. The vehicle remained at the same distance, the faint outline of its dark shape barely visible in the glow of my taillights. I kept driving, trying not to overthink it. Maybe they were just messing around, or maybe their headlights were broken. But the longer it went on, the more uneasy I became. Whoever was behind me wasn't trying to pass, wasn't falling back, and wasn't turning on their lights. They were just there, following. 30 minutes passed, and the car remained at the exact same distance. I could feel my nerves starting to fray, but I kept telling myself it was nothing, just some idiot playing a prank. But then, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The car behind me. It wasn't a car, at least, not in the traditional sense. As we passed through a section of the highway that cut between two rocky hills, I caught a glimpse of the vehicle's shape in the reflection of my rearview mirror. It wasn't a car. It was wrong. The edges were blurred, shifting, like it was flickering between reality and something else. There was no driver, no headlights, no engine noise, just this dark, shifting shape that clung to the shadows. My heart pounded as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What the hell was I looking at? Every instinct told me to floor it, to get as far away from that thing as possible. But I couldn't bring myself to speed up. It felt like a trap, like if I tried to outrun it, something terrible would happen. Instead, I slowed down, hoping that whatever it was would pass. But it didn't. It matched my speed exactly. I was driving maybe 45 miles per hour on an empty highway, and this thing kept its distance, never closing the gap, never falling back. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, studying me. I glanced back again, and this time, I saw something that sent a cold shiver down my spine. There was someone, or something, in the passenger seat of the car. Just a shadow, barely visible, but unmistakably there. I could make out the vague outline of a head, slumped slightly, as if it were staring directly at me through the rearview mirror. I nearly swerved off the road in panic. My foot hit the gas instinctively, and the car surged forward. But so did the figure. It wasn't driving any faster. It just moved closer, like it had been pulled toward me. I could feel its presence growing stronger, its dark energy pressing against me like a weight. It was suffocating. The road ahead was a blur as my mind raced. What the hell was this thing? A ghost? A hallucination? All I knew was that I had to get away from it. I pressed the accelerator harder, now pushing 80, 90 miles per hour. The wind roared against my windows. The engine growled beneath me, but the figure remained, always there, always watching. Finally, I saw the exit sign for a rest stop up ahead. The relief was immediate. I made a sharp turn onto the off-ramp, my tires screeching as I raced toward the empty parking lot. The lights of the rest stop flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the empty picnic tables and benches. I pulled in, parked, and jumped out of the car. My legs were shaking, my heart hammering in my chest. I scanned the highway behind me, half expecting to see the dark figure follow me off the road. But there was nothing. The road was empty. I was alone. For a moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe the long drive and the isolation of the desert had gotten to me. But then, I heard it. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind my car. I froze. The rest stop was deserted. There was no one else there. At least, there shouldn't have been. But the footsteps were unmistakable, growing louder, closer. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what was following me. But I did, and I'll never forget what I saw. Standing just beyond the glow of the rest stop lights was a man, or at least, what looked like a man. His skin was pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. He was tall, impossibly tall, his limbs too long, his fingers too thin. His eyes were empty, hollow pits of darkness. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stared at me with a cold, dead gaze. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I stumbled back toward my car, fumbling with the keys, desperate to get inside and lock the doors. But the man didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, like he was waiting for something. I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locking it in a frenzy. I threw the car into reverse, my tires spinning in the dirt as I backed out of the parking lot. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from him. As I sped back onto the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror again, expecting to see the man standing in the parking lot. But there was no one there. The rest stop was empty. I drove for hours, not stopping until the sun finally began to rise on the horizon. Only then did I dare to look back at the rearview mirror again. Nothing. No shadowy figure. No dark car following me. Just the long, empty road stretching out behind me. I never told anyone what happened that night. How could I? Who would believe me? But even now, whenever I'm driving late at night, I can't help but check the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that dark figure again, watching, waiting, because I know deep down that it's still out there, somewhere, waiting for me to drive by again. I've always loved driving at night. There's something magical about the empty highways, the darkness stretching out as far as the eye can see, and the feeling of freedom that comes with being on the road alone. But that night changed everything I thought I knew about solitude and safety. It was late September, and I had just finished a work assignment in San Diego. I was heading back home to Tucson, Arizona, where I lived and worked as a freelance graphic designer. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a canvas of stars and a crescent moon that hung low in the sky. I filled up my tank, grabbed a coffee, and set off, ready for the long drive ahead. The first leg of the journey was easy enough. The roads were mostly deserted, punctuated only by the occasional truck rumbling by. I was listening to a podcast about unsolved mysteries when I crossed into the vast stretches of desert landscape. The moonlight illuminated the road ahead, casting long shadows on either side. Around midnight, I reached a section of Highway 10, known for its desolation. It felt like the heart of nowhere. The speed limit was high, and I had been driving for hours, without passing any towns or gas stations. The desolation was palpable. It was just me and the endless road. I didn't mind the isolation, but I was acutely aware of how alone I felt. As I drove deeper into the night, I noticed a strange light flickering in my rearview mirror. It was dim at first, like the glow of a distant vehicle's headlights. I thought it was odd that I hadn't seen any cars for miles, but I figured it was just a late-night driver catching up to me. I kept my speed steady, the light growing brighter with each passing moment. But something was wrong. The glow didn't get any closer. It was as if it was stuck in place behind me, following me without moving an inch. I glanced back and saw that it wasn't a car at all. It was a faint blue light, pulsing softly like a dying star, casting an eerie glow over the road behind me. My pulse quickened. I had heard stories of strange lights in the desert, ghosts, will-o'-the-wisps, or whatever people wanted to call them. But I had always dismissed those tales as urban legends meant to scare tourists. Now, faced with this inexplicable phenomenon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to shake off my unease. I convinced myself that it was nothing more than a reflection or an optical illusion. I pressed on, but the blue light remained stubbornly behind me, still flickering, still pulsing. It felt like I was in some sort of twisted horror movie. As I entered a more desolate stretch of highway, my heart began to race. The road was lined with scraggly bushes and the occasional cactus, and I was starting to feel the weight of isolation settling in. I glanced at the gas gauge, almost empty. Panic bubbled beneath the surface as I realized I was miles away from the next exit. I decided to pull over. thinking I could take a moment to collect my thoughts. I parked on the shoulder, turned off my headlights, and sat in silence, the darkness pressing in around me. The blue light was still there, faintly visible in the distance. My heart raced as I struggled to catch my breath. I knew I needed to get back on the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. Taking a deep breath, I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. The moment I did, the blue light began to flicker rapidly. My heart sank as it started to grow larger, brighter, almost as if it was accelerating toward me. I could see it reflected in my rearview mirror, a soft glow that was impossible to ignore. My instincts kicked in. I pressed down on the accelerator, my car roaring to life as I sped down the deserted highway. The blue light followed suit, maintaining its distance yet somehow drawing closer. It felt as if it were feeding off my fear. For what felt like hours, I drove, the speedometer creeping higher. I was pushing 90 miles per hour, and still, that light stayed right behind me. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the rearview mirror was a magnet for my attention. I could feel the weight of the light bearing down on me, a spectral presence that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Then, as if sensing my desperation, the light flickered and dimmed for a moment. I dared to hope I had finally lost it, but the relief was short-lived. A chilling breeze swept through my car, despite the closed windows, sending shivers down my spine. My phone, which had been quietly playing music, suddenly went silent. The screen flickered before turning off completely. That's when I saw it, an apparition in the road ahead. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the night. It was a woman, draped in a flowing white dress, her long hair billowing in an unfelt wind. She was just standing there, motionless, staring right at me with hollow, lifeless eyes. I swerved to avoid her, my heart racing as I narrowly missed the phantom figure. I glanced back, expecting to see the blue light still following me, but now it had vanished. In its place, the woman was there, somehow right behind me, her ethereal form appearing in the rearview mirror as if she were perched in the back seat. I screamed, my voice breaking the stillness of the night as I stomped on the gas pedal. I could hear my tires screeching as I raced forward, my mind screaming at me to keep driving. I felt her presence, cold and heavy, invading my space, wrapping around me like a shroud. I was utterly trapped. As I barreled down the highway, I glanced back again. She was closer now, her face twisted in a silent scream, mouth opening wide as if to call out to me. I could feel the weight of despair radiating from her, a chill that seeped into my bones. In that moment, I understood. She was the reason for the blue light. She was a warning, a haunting from the other side, and I had unwittingly crossed into her realm. Desperation clawed at me. I needed to find help. I needed to get away. I slammed my foot down, praying I wouldn't crash, as I tore through the darkness. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of black that seemed to mock my panic. There was nothing out there, just me and that woman, an unwelcome passenger in my car. I could feel the air grow colder, the atmosphere inside my car shifting. The dashboard lights began to flicker, and I felt the engine sputter, as if it were struggling to keep up. In the distance, I saw a flicker of light, a gas station sign. It was a beacon in the dark, and I knew I had to reach it. I careened off the highway and into the gravel parking lot, my tires crunching against the loose stones. The gas station was old and run down, the flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow over the deserted lot. I jumped out of the car and sprinted toward the building, praying someone was inside. The door swung open, and I rushed in, breathless and terrified. The cashier looked up from his magazine, eyes widening in surprise at my sudden entrance. I could barely form words as I gasped for breath, trying to explain what had just happened. He must have seen the fear in my eyes, because he didn't question me. "Get to the back," he shouted, motioning toward the storage room. "Lock the door." I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted to the back, slamming the door shut behind me. I pressed my ear against the door, listening for the woman outside. The cashier called out, "Stay quiet. Don't make any noise." As I stood there, heart pounding, I could hear footsteps outside, slow, deliberate. The woman was out there, searching for me. I could almost feel her presence, cold and unyielding. I thought I was safe behind the locked door, but I knew she wouldn't stop until she found me. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, as I huddled in the dark. The cashier stood guard at the front, whispering reassurances. "Just hold on," he murmured. "It'll be okay. She can't come in here." I didn't know if he truly believed that, or if he was just trying to comfort me. The footsteps continued, circling the building like a predator stalking its prey. I could feel her rage, her despair, radiating through the walls. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the sound of shattering glass echoed through the station. I gasped, my heart racing as the cashier grabbed my arm. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, pulling me toward the back exit. We bolted out the back door into the darkness, the cool night air hitting my face. But it wasn't a relief. It felt suffocating. The woman was out there, lurking in the shadows. I could sense her, feel her cold breath against my neck. The cashier led me to an old pickup truck parked behind the gas station. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to unlock the door. I looked back, my blood running cold, as I caught a glimpse of the woman standing in the doorway of the gas station, her eyes locked onto mine. With a jolt, the truck door finally swung open, and I jumped inside. The cashier slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine with a roar. We tore out of the parking lot, gravel flying behind us as we sped back onto the highway. I didn't know where we were going, but I knew I had to escape. I glanced back one last time at the gas station, and for a moment, I thought I saw the blue light flickering in the distance. It was haunting, a reminder of what had just transpired. "Keep going," I shouted, my voice laced with panic. "Don't stop." The cashier nodded, his expression grave as he focused on the road ahead. We drove for what felt like an eternity, the darkness closing in around us. The woman was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, watching, waiting. Finally, we reached a small town, the lights of the buildings offering a semblance of safety. The cashier pulled into a diner parking lot, and I nearly collapsed from relief. He parked the truck, and we both jumped out, rushing inside. The diner was warm and inviting, filled with the comforting smells of coffee and bacon. I collapsed into a booth, still trembling as I tried to process what had happened. The cashier sat across from me, his eyes wide with concern. "What the hell was that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unable to find the words. All I knew was that I had brushed against something dark that night, something that should have stayed hidden. After an hour of gathering my thoughts and calming my nerves, I made my way to the restroom. As I washed my hands, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was pale, eyes wide with fear. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I hurried back to the booth, but when I returned, the cashier was gone. Confused, I looked around the diner, searching for him. But there was no sign of him, only the clattering of dishes and the hum of conversation. I sat there for a while, lost in thought, until the diner's owner came over to my table. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I felt the chill of the night creeping back in, the weight of what I had experienced settling heavily in my chest. Eventually, I managed to shake off the fear enough to drive home. The drive felt different now. The dark road stretched ahead, full of uncertainties. I kept my eyes glued to the road, glancing at my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see that blue light again. But it never appeared. When I finally reached my apartment in Tucson, I stepped inside, still shaken by the events of that night. I locked the door behind me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. But as I settled into bed, my mind raced with thoughts of the woman and the blue light. What had I seen? Had it all been a hallucination, or had I really encountered something otherworldly? No matter how many times I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, I knew the truth. I had brushed against the darkness that night, and I could feel it lurking just beneath the surface of my memory. Weeks passed, and the memory faded, but the feeling of being watched never truly left me. I resumed my late-night drives, always glancing in the rearview mirror, always feeling that chill run down my spine. I had learned to live with the knowledge that some things are better left undiscovered, some roads best not traveled. And every now and then, in the quiet of the night, I would catch a glimpse of something in the distance, a flickering blue light, pulsing softly like a heartbeat of the desert, waiting for its next traveler to chase. I'd always loved the freedom of the open road, the endless stretch of highway beneath me, the hum of the engine, and the ever-changing scenery made road trips the perfect escape from the pressures of everyday life. This particular journey was supposed to be no different, a cross-country trip from Ohio to California, with a few stops in between to break up the monotony. Just me, my car, and the endless horizon. The first few days went off without a hitch. I had my route mapped out, but I wasn't in a hurry. I'd stop at roadside diners, photograph the quirky landmarks, and sometimes take detours just for the thrill of the unknown. But then, about halfway through Nevada, things took a turn. A wrong turn, to be exact. I had been driving along Highway 50, aptly named the loneliest road in America. There were stretches of road where I didn't see another car for hours, just the endless desert on both sides. I hadn't realized how easy it was to feel isolated out there, with nothing but the sun baking the sand and the occasional tumbleweed drifting across the road. It was late afternoon when I saw a sign that piqued my interest. Detour, Old Route 66. I'd always been fascinated by the old highway, the history that had faded with time. So, naturally, I took the turn. The road was rougher, more desolate than the highway, but I didn't mind. This was what I wanted, off the beaten path, away from the familiar. After about an hour on the old road, the sky began to darken, and I realized I hadn't seen a single other car. No gas stations, no diners, nothing. Just miles of cracked asphalt and the desert's eerie quiet. My fuel gauge was dipping into the red, and I cursed myself for not filling up back on the highway. But there was no turning back now. I was too far gone. As night fell, the headlights of my car cut through the darkness like knives, illuminating the road just a few feet ahead. The moon hung low and orange in the sky, casting an otherworldly glow over the barren landscape. I felt a growing unease gnawing at my gut, but I tried to push it aside. I'd find a town soon, a gas station. I had to. About an hour later, my headlights caught a glimpse of something on the horizon. An old, weathered sign swinging on rusty chains. Gas. 2 miles. Relief washed over me, and I pushed the accelerator a little harder. The road twisted and turned, and soon I found myself pulling into what could only be described as a relic from another time. The gas station looked ancient, like it hadn't been in operation for decades. The pumps were old and rusty, the kind you'd see in a black and white photograph from the 1950s. A single light flickered above the entrance to the small, dilapidated convenience store. I sat there for a moment, the engine idling, debating whether to even bother. But I had no choice. The needle on my fuel gauge was now firmly below the E. I stepped out of the car, the dry desert wind whipping through my hair. As I approached the pump, I noticed the price on the old faded display, 20 cents a gallon. That made no sense. I glanced around, looking for any sign of life, but there was nothing, not even a sound, save for the occasional creak of the old sign in the wind. Reluctantly, I walked toward the convenience store. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and a musty smell hit me immediately, like the place hadn't been aired out in years. Behind the counter sat an old man, hunched over, his skin leathery and weathered by years under the desert sun. He didn't look up when I entered. His eyes were fixed on a small, flickering television in the corner that seemed to be showing static. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual, despite the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. I need to fill up. Do these pumps still work? The old man didn't respond at first. He just sat there, motionless, as if he hadn't heard me. I cleared my throat, louder this time. His head turned slowly toward me, and when his eyes met mine, I felt a chill run down my spine. They were clouded, almost milky, like he was blind. But somehow, I knew he could see me. "You're on the road now," he said in a voice so raspy it sounded like sandpaper. "Ain't no leaving the road." I blinked, not sure what to make of his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to suppress the growing discomfort in my chest. "You took the wrong turn," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once you're on the road, it don't let you go." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I wasn't sure if he was just senile or if I was standing in the middle of some kind of bad joke. But there was no humor in his tone. His eyes, milky and distant, bored into me like he knew something I didn't. "I just need some gas," I said, forcing a smile that felt out of place. The old man didn't answer. He simply turned back to the static on the television and muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. Feeling more unsettled than ever, I backed out of the store and headed toward the pump. It clicked and hissed as I squeezed the handle, but the needle barely moved. I tried not to think about the old man's cryptic words as I filled the tank as much as I could. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to me. I was tired, hungry, and anxious to get back on a real road, one with other cars and signs of life. But as I drove away from the station, something felt wrong. The landscape around me hadn't changed. It was still the same stretch of desert, the same endless road. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard and frowned. It had been stuck at 10:03 p.m. for what felt like hours. I shook my head. Maybe the clock was broken. I tried turning on the radio, but all I got was static. I flipped through the stations, but there was nothing. Not even the usual faint hum of far-off AM talk shows. Just static. The darkness outside the car seemed to press in on me, suffocating and thick. The road stretched endlessly ahead, with no signs, no markers, nothing to indicate I was getting anywhere. My stomach churned as I realized I hadn't seen another car, not since I'd left the highway, not a single soul. As the hours dragged on, I began to feel disoriented. I checked my phone, but there was no signal, no GPS. It was as if I had driven off the edge of the world and into some forgotten pocket of reality. I tried to calm myself down, gripping the wheel tighter as my knuckles turned white. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Then, in the distance, I saw something. Lights, faint flickering lights. Relief surged through me, and I pressed the gas pedal a little harder, eager to find civilization. But as I drew closer, I realized something was off. The lights weren't from a town or gas station. It was the same gas station, the same rusty pumps, the same flickering light above the entrance. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled back into the same lot I had just left. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. How had I ended up back here? Had I taken a wrong turn again? I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest, and approached the convenience store. The door creaked open, and the musty smell greeted me once more. The old man was still there, sitting behind the counter, staring at the static-filled TV. "You're back," he said, his voice devoid of any surprise or emotion. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, pacing in front of the counter. "I just left. I went straight. I didn't turn." The old man didn't answer. He just stared at the TV, the same flickering static, as if nothing had changed, as if time had stopped. I turned and bolted out of the store, running to my car. I had to get out of there. I had to find a way off this cursed road. I jumped in the driver's seat, slammed the door, and floored the gas. The car screeched out of the lot, tires kicking up dust. My heart raced as I sped down the road, determined not to look back. But the further I drove, the more the landscape blurred into the same barren wasteland. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't getting anywhere. My mind was spinning, and I was starting to feel lightheaded, as if I'd been driving for days. No food, no water, no sleep, just the endless road and the oppressive silence. Then, just as I thought I was losing my mind, I saw it again. The gas station. Same pumps, same flickering light. I slammed on the brakes, my hands shaking as I stared at the scene in disbelief. I had been driving for hours, miles even, and yet here I was, right back where I started. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my vision blurred with panic. I stepped out of the car, my legs trembling as I approached the gas station once more. The door creaked open, and there he was, the old man, sitting behind the counter, staring at the static. "You can't leave the road," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "It won't let you." I collapsed to my knees, my head spinning. There was no escape. I was trapped on the road in this endless loop, and there was nothing I could do. The road had claimed me. There's something about long drives that gives me peace. Just me, the open road, and my thoughts. But this trip, this one changed everything. It started like any other road trip. I was driving from my home in Portland, Oregon, down to visit my brother in Northern California. I had the weekend off, and I thought, why not take the scenic route? Highway 101, with its winding cliffs and coastal views, had always been one of my favorites. So I packed up, grabbed a coffee, and hit the road just before dawn. The first few hours were uneventful. The sun was still low in the sky, the Pacific glittering off to my right as I cruised along the coastline. I had my music on low, just enough to keep me company. Occasionally, I'd pass a small town or an RV pulled off to the side for a view. But for the most part, it was just me and the road. After a while, I noticed something strange. The GPS on my phone flickered. One moment it was showing the next turn I needed to take, and the next, it blanked out, leaving nothing but a spinning loading symbol. I wasn't too worried. I knew the general direction, and besides, I'd traveled this route enough times to know it pretty well. But then, something else happened. The road signs started to disappear. First, it was subtle, one or two signs here and there that I couldn't quite make out. Then, after another hour or so, they were gone entirely. No markers for towns, no mileage signs, nothing but the highway stretching ahead. I passed a small gas station on the side of the road and decided to pull over. My gas was getting low, and I figured it'd be a good place to stretch my legs. But when I pulled up, the station looked abandoned. The pumps were old and rusted, and the windows were covered in dust. I peered inside but couldn't see much through the grime. The door creaked open when I pushed it, but there was no one behind the counter. The place smelled of mildew, like it hadn't been touched in years. An old calendar hung on the wall behind the register, yellowed with age. The year? 1993. I figured maybe the place had just been left to rot. It wasn't uncommon for old rural stations like this to close down. Still, it unnerved me. I walked back to my car, deciding I'd just push through to the next town. But as I started the engine, I realized something odd. The sun hadn't moved. It was still in the same spot in the sky as it had been when I pulled over. Maybe I hadn't been inside as long as I thought? I shrugged it off and kept driving. But after another hour on the road, my unease grew. There were no towns, no other cars, just the same stretch of highway, repeating itself over and over. Every so often, I'd pass a dirt road leading off into the forest, but they looked more like animal trails than actual roads. My phone was still useless. No GPS, no signal, just a black screen and that spinning icon that felt like it was mocking me. As the sun started to dip lower on the horizon, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I wasn't just lost. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. That's when I saw it. In the distance, maybe a quarter-mile ahead, was a car. It was old, maybe from the 70s, with its rusty frame and faded paint. It was parked on the side of the road, facing the opposite direction, as if it had broken down. I slowed as I passed, expecting to see someone inside, maybe waving for help. But there was no one, just the car. And as I looked closer, I realized the windows were shattered, the seats inside ripped to shreds, like something wild had torn through it. But what really made my skin crawl was the fact that it was covered in fresh dust, as if it had been sitting there, untouched, for years. I sped up, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I didn't want to be anywhere near that car. I drove for what felt like another hour, but time seemed wrong. The sun wasn't setting like it should. My gas gauge hadn't moved. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding through thickening trees. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the grip of panic creeping in. Then I saw it again. The same car, same position, same shattered windows. My foot hit the gas hard, and I sped past it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I had to be losing it. I was seeing things. I was stuck in some kind of loop. I told myself it was impossible, but the dread inside me kept growing, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I tried everything, turned around, took one of the dirt roads, even stopped the car for a while to gather my thoughts. But nothing worked. No matter what I did, no matter how far I drove, I kept ending up back at that car. The fourth time I passed it, night had finally fallen. I saw a figure standing next to the car. I hit the brakes hard, skidding to a stop a few hundred feet away. I stared through the windshield, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. The figure was tall, thin, but distorted somehow. It was standing perfectly still, just staring down the road in my direction, though I couldn't make out its face in the dark. I fumbled for my phone again, but there was no signal, just the same useless spinning icon. I looked back up at the figure. It hadn't moved. It just stood there, waiting. Without thinking, I threw the car into reverse, my tires screeching as I pulled back. My heart raced as I tried to put as much distance between me and that thing as possible. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw it again, standing right behind my car, impossibly close. I slammed the gas and sped forward, swerving onto the shoulder to avoid hitting the car. I didn't care if I wrecked. I just had to get out of there. The road twisted and turned, the trees growing thicker, their branches looming overhead like skeletal hands reaching out for me. My headlights flickered once, twice, then they went out completely. I screamed, slamming my fists on the steering wheel as the car sputtered to a stop. Total darkness engulfed me. I sat there, hyperventilating in the silence. The only sound was the faint rustling of the trees in the wind. My eyes darted in every direction, but I couldn't see a thing. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I fumbled with the keys, trying to restart the engine, but nothing worked. The footsteps grew louder, circling the car. I could feel the weight of something just outside the window, watching me. And then I saw it. A pale face, pressed against the driver's side window, its eyes hollow and black, lips pulled back in a twisted grin. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was daylight. My car was parked on the side of Highway 101, just outside of a small town. The sun was high in the sky, and everything seemed normal. But I knew it wasn't. I haven't been back on that highway since. I don't drive at night anymore, but I can still hear the footsteps in my dreams, and sometimes, when I look in the rearview mirror, I swear I see that car again, waiting for me to pass by, waiting for me to return. And I know one day I will.